Hello, welcome back to Learning Music Theory. Today we're going to be going over a very important subject. This is probably one of the most important topics in all of music theory because everything builds off of this. So what is it? It's intervals. So what is an interval? An interval is the distance between two notes and how we build chords and scales. So as you see here, we have a few different type of intervals. These are specifically the intervals for the major scale. We have a unison here, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, and perfect eighth. So now you might be like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, what's going on? Don't worry, we're going to get right into that. But first, I want to tell you how do you find an interval. So it's very simple. To find an interval, you just need to count the line and space between the notes. Or if you're on the piano, right down here, you would just count by whole steps and half steps. So, for example, a whole step up would be a major second, and from the major second, a whole step up would be a major third. So for example, 4 steps up will give us a major third, and 7 steps up is going to give us a perfect fifth. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how we do that on sheet music. It's really simple. So we start by counting on the lines and spaces. So we start on our tonic note, which is the note we're starting on. So this first note is a 1, that line, and then this space right here would be 2. This line right here would be 3. This space would be 4. This line 5. This line 6. And then this line 7. So as you can see, we made it up 7 spaces and lines, which got out to the major 7 interval, because we went up 7 times. So if we did this here, we would have 1, 2, 3, because that's 3. We could do the perfect fifth is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. So now I'm going to show you the different type of intervals we have, because this is specifically the intervals that we would use for the major scale. Okay, so here are all the types of intervals that we have. It might look confusing, but it's really not that confusing. So we have a major scale. A major interval, sorry. I like to think of the major interval as a whole step up from your tonic, right? So if you have your tonic note, for example, is C, right? Your C is your tonic note. A whole step up is D, which it gives you a major second interval. And then a whole step up from D would give you E, which is a major third interval from C. So that's how it works. But we wouldn't go up to the major interval to F sharp. And I'll show you why in just a second, and it has something to do with this right here. So that's kind of how you could build up your major intervals. So from C to D is a major second. From D to E would be a major third. From G to A would be a major 6th, and from A to B would be a major 7th. So the reason why we're not using our F or our G is, we'll go over that in a second. So for minor scales, I like to think of it as half steps because it is a half step up from your tonic note will give you a minor interval. Okay, so from C, a half step up would be C sharp, which gives us a minor second interval. Oops. It's like Jaws, right? So if we go from C to D, that's a major second, which, by the way, major and minor scales are all built off a major second interval. Not many scales have a minor second interval in them, unless you go into modes, but that's for a different video. So we start off with the major second. So now, if we go up a half step from this D, so if we go up a half step from this D, it would be a D sharp / E flat. We would use E flat in this context because we already have a D. If you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the last video, I go over that. So we would have an E flat. So E flat is the minor third up. You could also think of it as a half step below the E, so which is our major third. So if we go to half step below, it's a minor interval. Or if we go a half step above our major second, it's a minor third. So same thing if we go a half step above our G, minor 6, half step above A, it's a minor 7th. And if you want to know why we use the notes we use, my last video I go over how we build minor and major scales. Okay, so now for this perfect interval that I was talking so much about. Perfect intervals are very important. There's only 2 of them, and that is the perfect fifth and perfect fourth of a scale. So only the fourth and then the fifth. I don't know why my pen is doing that, sorry. So only the perfect fourth and fifth. So there is no minor fifth interval or major fifth interval, same thing with the fourth. Why is that? I actually don't know the full backstory, but just keep in mind that you have a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, and if it's anything a sharp fourth or sharp fifth, that's a tritone, which we'll get to in a second. So the perfect fourth and fifth is used in minor and major scales. It's not going to change. So very strong feeling tones, right? So it's only these two notes. But what if we had something in between them? What's the notes between a perfect fourth and fifth, since there's no major or minor fifth or fourth? That's called a tritone. And the reason why I put it in this devilish color is because it's kind of known as a cursed interval. It's very, what's the word again? Dissonance. So it sounds very dissonant. It's probably the most dissonant note in all of music. And it's also used in the opening for The Simpsons. So tritone is a sharp perfect fourth or flat perfect fifth, or how I wrote it here was a half step above a perfect fourth or a half step below a perfect fifth. It is rarely used. It's used in Locrian modes, some certain modes. I think also like Lydian has a sharp fourth. But basically, all you need to know is that it's a very dissonant sounding notes, and it's very rarely used. So you're not going to have to worry about the tritone much, but that is basically what is between our perfect fourth and fifth, since we don't have a major fourth or major fifth interval. Okay, so now augmented. Augmented and diminished are probably used less than a tritone, to be honest. Like, you're not really going to use a diminished interval. It's not so much used because it's basically just how it's worded, right? So you wouldn't really say, oh, that's a diminished sixth interval. It depends. Once you get into jazz theory, you will, but most of the times you're using these top three here, right? So an augmented is just a half step higher than a major interval. I may be wrong on that, by the way. Don't quote me, but I rarely, very rarely heard someone say, oh yeah, that's an augmented sixth interval, unless you're talking about some jazz chords, which is a little advanced for this lesson. But so, for example, so we would get a D sharp. So we very rarely are going to name this, but this is an augmented second interval. It's also a minor third interval. If you notice from before, it's really just an E flat, but it's really used just in case of naming. So if you're like in a major scale, you're not going to say E flat. You're just going to say it's the augmented second. It's really just for naming purposes, kind of like enharmonic naming, but it's the same thing as a minor third interval. It's just a half step higher than major, and we just use it for naming purposes. Same thing with diminished, if I get my purple. So if we go from C to B flat, we get a minor 7 interval. But if we go down from this B flat, we would get an A, aka a B double flat, which is just a diminished 7. So it's one of those cases of just enharmonic naming. It doesn't really affect the note itself. That's what you really need to put a pin on. It doesn't affect the note. It's just how you name it. So really, it's a major 6, but depending on where you'd use it, you would say diminished. So a good example is like a diminished chord, right? So we would have E. An E diminished chord is E, G, B flat, Mi flat, because it's the flat fifth. The tritone, really, but it's a flat fifth, so it's the diminished. It's a diminished fifth of it. So that's how that works, basically. Don't spend too much time on these two. Really focus on these three, and tritones are kind of, you would notice. Okay, so how do we get the name? So the interval is based off the major interval that happens in the major scale. For example, the minor third interval is a minor third because it's a half step below the major third. So the way this is worded is a little bit confusing. All you need to know is that we kind of base everything off the major scale. So major scale, actually I think the next picture is, okay, no. So major scale is a major third, goes major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, etc. How do we find the minor third of the C scale? We would just alter the notes that we need to. What is the minor third of C? We would just go to the major third and flatten it by a half step. So the half step would give us a minor third interval, which is basically what I meant to explain. If this is confusing, don't worry about it. Ask me any questions in the comments. But basically, we just derive it from the major scale, and then from there we could alter it how we need it. If we needed a diminished, we would go 2 down and get a diminished third. And if we needed an augmented, we would go one up and get an augmented third, which those notes would be a minor third would be E flat, a diminished second, a diminished third would be D, and then an augmented third would be F. So it's just basically how we get the names. Okay, so there's two notes we didn't really mention, and that is the unison and octave. What are these? So the unison is the distance between a singular note placed twice. So this is a unison note. This is a unison interval. Notice how it's the same note played twice. But this is not to be confused with an octave, which is the same note played higher or lower on the keyboard. So this is a unison, and this is an octave. That's an octave lower, or an octave higher. If you're still confused with octaves, I have a video on that. But basically, unison is the same note played at the same pitch, like the same place. An octave is the same note played on a different register, or not different register. Actually, yeah, like a different register or pitch. So like a higher pitch or lower pitch. So now we look at the major scale and how we build it. So we build the major scale by using this formula. It goes a unison, which all scale starts with a unison. Then we go major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave. So this is how the major scale is built. There's no augmented or diminished in here, and everything is built off majors and perfects. Notice that. Because only thing that's going to change between the major scale and the minor scale are these three sections: the major third, major sixth, and major seventh. And so we're just going to change these for the major minor scales. But once we get into modes, we start to change things like the fourths and the seconds. But that's for another video. And if we look at the minor scale, sorry for the wonky flats, I don't know what happened, but we go from a major second to a minor third. So this changed from a major from before to minor. And then we go minor sixth, minor seventh. But the octave and fifth and fourth stay the same. So this would just be a minor major. So let's go back to our other one. So this is the major scale. Major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh, octave. And so here we have unison. That's just our first note. And then we have major second, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor sixth, minor seventh, perfect eighth. Okay, so now I just wanted to show you guys how each interval sounds. So we're going to start and just build up. So here's a minor second. So here's a minor second. Major second. Minor third. Major third. Perfect fourth. Tritone. Major fifth. Perfect fifth. Minor sixth. Major sixth. Minor seventh. Major seventh. And then an octave. So that's really all for the video. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments below.